Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. I have to resist the urge to whisper because I'm afraid that the 4-year-old is going to hear me. But I'm going to try and get this out real quick. I don't think I'm going to post it till Tuesday, so I can have an actual Tuesday tag or tag Tuesday, whatever, which I don't think I've ever done that before. I'm simply not that organized. But this is a tag that was created by Steve Donahue, and it's called the Vacation Tag. And when I saw it, I got very upset because I had been planning in my own head to do something called the Travel Tag, which is very similar to what he did. So I decided I would just go with it. He just beat me to it. So I'll put the link to his video below in the description box, and I'll just get right with it. So let's see. The first question in the vacation tag is, what's your favorite book about somebody taking a vacation? I don't think I have a favorite book. In fact, I had a hard time remembering books. He mentioned, in his tag, he mentioned two of them. The Towers of Trebizond and Enchanted April. I would have come up with those, but he came up with them. So instead, I, threw my mind back to the very first book I ever remember reading about people being on vacation, and that was the Bobbsey twins at the Seashore. I remember really loving that book when I was maybe 8 or 9. So that might have been my favorite one as a child. I think also, for some reason, the Jane Austen books, Pride and Prejudice, when Lizzie goes to Pemberley, she's on vacation when she visits Pemberley with her aunt and uncle. And then in Northanger Abbey, when Catherine goes to visit Northanger Abbey, those are vacation too. So I enjoyed both of those books, so maybe I'll just say those. And then I was thinking about other kids' books like Magic by the Lake by Edward Eager, where the kids go stay by the lake. I should have gotten the book out. Anyway, it's a kid's book, and he wrote Half Magic and Knight's Castle, a bunch of them. So that's a nice book about kids going on vacation. There's a bunch of them, I think, with kids on vacation having adventures. So anyway, those are just some of the ones that I've enjoyed that feature people going on vacation or traveling a bit. Let's see. Question number 2. Do you read travel writing? I do. I like Paul Theroux. I usually tend to get these out of the library and not have them, not own them. I just read a book last year, at the end of last year, that I just absolutely loved by Patrick Lee Fermor. I've read books by Bill Bryson. I really enjoyed the one where he's walking through Australia. But the 3 travel books that I really, really highly recommend and just absolutely love are this book, How the Heather Looks, by Joan Bodger. This came out, I think, in the late 50s or early 60s, but it's How the Heather Looks, a joyous journey to the British sources of children's books. It is absolutely delightful. It's about a family with 2 young children, and they travel through England and sort of this literary tour of just children's books. So The Wind in the Willows features in this, Beatrix Potter, Rudyard Kipling, all kinds of literature. It's really, really charming. I highly, highly recommend it. But don't find out what happens to the family when they grow up, because it's tragic. But and I'm just giving that as a warning because I was shocked when I researched it. But this book, highly, highly, if you love children's literature and you love England, this is the book for you. It's really, really charming. Another book about traveling that I really love, and I just found out about this a few, I guess it was more than a few years ago. And I showed it in my aunt's, in the books I inherited from my aunt. I actually gave this to her, I think the year before she died. It's called A Sense of the World by Jason Roberts. It's how a blind man became history's greatest traveler. This is an absolutely amazing book. It's in the early 1800s. This blind man became a world traveler, and he became a famous best-selling author. It says, let's see. Oh, I was going to read the... Here we go. Born in 1786, James Holman was in many ways the quintessential world explorer, a dashing mix of discipline, recklessness, and accomplishment, a Knight of Windsor, Fellow of the Royal Society, and best-selling author. It was easy to forget that he was intermittently crippled, he had terrible rheumatoid arthritis, and permanently blind. This is just an absolute fascinating story about this man and how he lived his life and how much he loved traveling, and how back in that time, in the early 1800s, that he was able to travel all around the world. He went to South America, he crossed Russia. I mean, really, really fascinating book. I highly, highly recommend it. A Sense of the World by Jason Roberts. And then the last travel book that I highly recommend is one that I did inherit from my aunt again. It says Jacqueline Brophy, London, 1955. And it's the book The Path to Rome by Hilaire Belloc. This is just an amazing story. He walks from, I forget the name of the town, a town in France. He was an interesting person. He was friends with G.K. Chesterton, and he was half French and half English, so he grew up bilingual. And he walks from France to Rome, so he has to walk across the Alps. And he kept this journal, and this is the story of his walk. And it's amazing, and he's also an artist, so he drew these sketches. But this is so creative. He's just a brilliant mind. He just is bubbling over with amazing creative ideas and humor. He's just so incredibly clever. It's just a wonderful, wonderful memoir. It should be, I mean, it's an unsung classic. It should be a classic. He's that brilliant. It's just amazing. So, The Path to Rome by Hilaire Belloc. Highly, highly recommend it. So let's see. So those are my, oh, now I lost my, okay. Let's see. So those are my 3 favorite travel books. Question 3, what are your books on vacation rituals? And I think I have 2. One is to find a bookstore sometimes. Like when I was growing up, we would often stay in Dewey Beach or Rehoboth Beach, and there was a bookstore there that we would go to. And then in the past, since I've been married, sometimes we go to Bethany Beach, also in Delaware, and there's a really nice bookstore there. And we always stay at the same house, and it's just about a 5 or 6 block walk to this bookstore. So at least once during the vacation, we would go visit that bookstore. When we go to the Outer Banks, it's not, I don't know of a bookstore that we usually go to. So when we go there, I used to, when I had a bunch of young kids, I used to just go to the library. My mother would do this too, and just get stacks of books to bring with us. I'd just put them all in a big paper bag and bring them down and just put them out on a coffee table so people have something to read. Because usually the books they leave there are kind of trashy, so I prefer to bring my own. So that's one ritual. But the other thing is to just find a new and cozy place to read a book. So if it's at the beach, usually it's on the sand at the beach, or on a porch or something, or by the pool, or in a cafe, or just some sort of, even a nice, you're in a different bedroom, so you have this luxurious bed that you're reading from or something. But just to find a nice new place to read a book. That's my books on vacation ritual. Oh, those 2. Looking for books, a new place to buy books, and a place to read nice place to read a book. What's your favorite book you found or read first while on vacation? So I have 3. I remember when I was 16, it was 1976, and everybody was celebrating the bicentennial except my family decided to find our roots. So me and two of my sisters and my parents went to Ireland, Scotland, and England. And when we were in Cornwall, we stayed at a little town called Mousehole. I think it's pronounced like that, spelled mouse hole. And it was this really charming little town right on the sea. And my parents had a bedroom it was a bed and breakfast, had a bedroom on the second floor, but we three girls were up in the garret. And it was this big room with these eaves and window seats in the little gables. And there was a sitting area and beds, and there was a bathroom. And I found, you know how vacationers will leave behind a book? I found the book, Report to the Commissioner. So here I am in this charming town in Cornwall, England, looking out over the sea, you know, all the little boats and everything. And I'm reading this book, Report to the Commissioner, which was a bestseller at that time about corruption in the New York Police Department. And it was really gripping. It was just a page turner. I was 16 at the time. And I just sat in the window seat and read all afternoon and all evening until like 2 o'clock in the morning when I finally finished the book. So I have that distinct memory of it was probably the contrast of reading a book about the New York Police Department in such an exotic location like Cornwall, England. So I remember that. Another book I really remember reading was just about 10 years ago or so. We went to Spain. 3 of my kids studied Spanish at the University of Avila, and for the summer. It was a month-long thing. And we went for a week, and we stayed in this little apartment. And every morning, while my husband was still sleeping and the younger kids were still sleeping, I would get up and walk a few blocks to this cafe, which was right outside one of the beautiful gates of Avila. Avila is like a UNESCO site. It's the medieval walls are perfectly preserved. It's like a little town, medieval town frozen in time. It's just absolutely exquisite. And outside one of the gates, which I can't remember the name of it, I should. There's a cafe, and I would drink coffee and read there. And it was the gate that all the tourist bus would go to. So it was so strange. It was in Spain, in this medieval town. And I'm watching tourist buses, and a lot of them were Japanese. So watching these groups of Japanese people get out chattering in Japanese and going into this Spanish medieval city or town. And I was reading the book Penrod by Booth Tarkington. And Penrod is sort of like, it's set around the turn of the last century in Indiana. It's kind of like a Tom Sawyer type book. It's about a young boy and his adventures. So it's super Americana. So I'd be reading this book, and it's hysterical. It's a really funny, well-written book. Reading this book set in Americana in this medieval Spanish town with watching Japanese tourists get off their tour bus. It was just the contrast really made me remember that book. And then the last book I remember reading was actually coming home from a vacation. Oh my gosh, this was 35 years ago, something like that. I had been to visit Italy, and it was when I first realized that I got nervous getting on planes. Like, I'd taken planes before and I'd get a little bit nervous, but this was coming back, I guess because I was coming back by myself. I was with a tourist group, but I realized that I felt really, really anxious about getting on the plane. And I was in the airport. I don't even know if it was Rome or Milan. I can't remember. But I realized I needed a book to read or something to distract me because I was feeling really anxious. And so I only had a few minutes, and I was in the bookstore at the airport, and they only had a few English books anyway, but I found this one book called Christ Stopped at Eboli by Primo Levi, not sure, Levi. And he was this doctor, and I think he had communist sympathies, and he was arrested by Mussolini and sent into exile way at the southern end of the Italian peninsula where they were really, really poor. he was in this little village in exile, and the kind of joke was that Christ stopped at the village just north of them. Eboli was the name of that village, and whatever village he was in had been ignored because it was so poor and such a backwater place. And it was a book just of his memoirs, of his years spent in exile. And it was just so well written. It was such a gripping book. And I remember opening it up as the plane was taking off, and I finished reading it, 8 hours later as it was the plane was landing, 8 or 9 hours later. So I just remember that book got me through that airplane flight, and I just read the entire time. Let's see. Question number 5. Have you ever light-fingered a book from a vacation stay? I don't think so. If I did, it was because I packed it by mistake or something, but I never did conscientious. I never did it on purpose. Number 6, and I'm not even sure I did. I don't know. Number 6, some of your favorite books set in exotic locales. So I have, let's see, I started listing them. A Town Called Alice, or is it A Town Like Alice? Town Like Alice by Nevil, Shute. I think that's in Malaysia and Australia and England. It's got several locations. A few years ago, I read a book called The Last Resort, which was really interesting. It was, it was nonfiction. It was about a guy talking about his parents who owned this resort camp in Zimbabwe and how they were coping with all the political craziness that was going on. The Last Resort, that was really interesting. I read this really great book called Running Over Lemons. I think it was by Chris Stewart, maybe was his name. He was a drummer for the band Genesis, if anyone remembers them. And he gave up the rock and roll world, he and his wife, and they moved to Spain, out in the country in Spain. And I think he's a travel writer, but he wrote, this is Running Over Lemons is his memoir of his wife and he moving to Spain. And it's hysterically funny, really delightful book. I highly recommend it, Running Over Lemons. And then I was thinking, because I'm reading about World War II, I was thinking about rereading these trilogies by Olivia Manning. She wrote the Balkan trilogy and the Levant trilogy, and it's set during World War II, or maybe just after as well, in the Balkans and the Levant. Those are really interesting, and I remember being so absorbed and wanting to go visit those places when reading those books. And then I was thinking Our Man in Havana by Greene. That's an exotic place. Or The Comedians, also by Greene, which is set in Haiti. Okay, that's all I came up with for exotic locales. I'm sure I could think of a lot more. Let's see. Number 7, do you think the coronavirus will kill us all? I hope not. Question number 8, what was the last book you read while on vacation? Last summer, we were at the beach, and I got really sunburned, and I spent a day in bed just reading a Georgette Hare detective mystery called Why Shoot a Butler. So that was the last, and I distinctly remember that because I was so sunburned, I was like ill almost, and yeah. And then the summer before that, we had a cabana. Instead of just an umbrella, they put up like this big tent thing. Oh, it was so beautiful. It was the breeze from the ocean, and you could sit there in complete shade. You didn't have to worry about getting sunburned. And that vacation, the vacation before last, I read A Spool of Blue Thread by Ann Tyler. Thoroughly enjoyed that. So let's see. So last summer it was Why Shoot a Butler by Georgette Hare, and I'm just adding in a bonus because I happen to remember the book I read the summer before that, A Spool of Blue Thread by Ann Tyler. I really like Ann Tyler. Anyway, question number 9 is tag people. So I'm not good at tagging people. If you see this and you like the idea, go for it. So anyway, happy travels. Talk to you later. Bye.